Okay. Switcheroo.
The old switcheroo.
Turn on the old switcheroo. I don't know what voice that is,
That
but
reminded me of Jack Nicholson. That I just watched him in The Departed again.
you could watch that over and over.
I completely agree.
Like that is just a staple. It's
Every
like any one of those movies, like one of those, there's a lot of movies like Tombstone and The Departed.
Oh yeah.
Like they could just come on cable TV in mid movie.
Yeah, and
It doesn't
just
matter.
stop
Watch
what
it.
you're doing.
Just watch it.
Every time I watch The Departed, and it's usually a couple years between viewings, and I've seen it like, played it as a current up until now. And every time I watch it, I go, okay, now I get what happened.
hmm
Like, I think finally I've got my head around the storylines between Damon
hmm
and, let's see, Matt Damon and
Leonardo.
DiCaprio. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, probably for 3 years, I watched that movie only vaguely understanding the storylines and who was a good guy and who was a bad guy.
hmm
And like, I
So who's the good guy?
well, to me, DiCaprio is the
Yeah,
good guy.
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it took me, like I said, it took a few years before I realized they were paralleling the two of them rising in the ranks of the places they were trying to
Yes.
infiltrate.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, oh, how thick-headed am I that I didn't pick up on that, you know, the first couple times I watched this. But yeah, yesterday or this week I watched it in a couple installments, and even
So
still,
what was your take on it? Like your fresh take on it? What did you think?
well, let's see. They hit on lying a lot. Um,
The rat,
the rat
obviously.
theme is big, and like it's lying to other people, but also lying to yourself is kind of a theme. Self-deception. Uh, Matt Damon's love interest, the psychologist girlfriend. It's interesting, like watching her navigate. She's lying to him about,
hmm
having an affair with DiCaprio and possibly
The
having
whole
his
thing,
baby.
I think, is about self-deception.
Yeah,
The whole
that's a
thing.
pretty good synopsis of it. You're right. Because she gets so upset when she finds out that Damon has been lying about his
Yeah, and
role
it's
in all
like
this.
you've been
And like
sleeping with
you
another guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah.
One of my favorite lines in that is when he's talking about, I think he says Freud. Freud said, what the Freud said about the Irish, and he said, yeah, that you're impervious to psychoanalysis. You're the
Oh,
only people
oh,
impervious to
that's right. Yeah,
psychoanalysis.
yeah. That's the line
And
there.
then eventually he gets to another line where he says they're lying in bed and he says, you got to get out. Matt Damon to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
girl
Uh-huh.
because
I'll stay here in this.
I'm Irish. I live my whole life with things not being right.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's pretty good writing.
It is good writing. The other thing that always stands out to me in that movie is like, when they talk about somebody being a man of their time, like that's a movie of its time because there was only in technology a real short window where they got out of pagers into cell phones, which played a huge role in that
hmm
movie, but specifically T9 texting cell phones
Yes.
so that they can text in their pockets. And then, like, I don't know, less than a year after that movie comes out, it's all touch
No,
screens
nobody
and
does it.
QWERTY. So yeah, every time I watch that, I'm like, this could only happen at that point in history. Like it doesn't age well in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny though how maybe this is a dad hack. Okay. I've been researching. This will be my first dad hack. Second one has more relevance to what we're talking about today. But this one, I've been researching different screenplay writers and just, I do that a lot. Just like I like to I love to listen to like Joe Pesci talk about working with Scorsese.
Ooh.
So if you go on YouTube Shorts, there's a lot of him talking about the process of just working with Scorsese and
Mm.
developing these iconic scenes. And so it's both writers and actors, but I like to listen to writers. There's this one writer who is talking about writing for TV.
Mhm.
And one point would be Scorsese said, I think he decided early on that he wouldn't write for TV because he knew he was going to be portraying the world he kind of grew up in, which was violent and it was the streets. And he was like, I knew
Yeah.
I couldn't really show that on TV because it's just too violent.
hmm
So that's why he got into film, is because he was like, this is the only place I could show an R-rated film. Likewise, this lady was talking about great screenplays and specifically great TV pilots. So she started listing all these great TV pilots that she was like, oh, they're the best. And it was all like early stuff for us, like in the 70s and 80s that
Mm-hmm.
was obscure that I'd never even heard of. And then I went back and watched some of them because I just thought, really, can it be that good?
Yeah.
And they were that good. Like one of them was Wise Guy. Do you remember the show?
Mm-mm.
So if you look up 86 to 1990, it ran on CBS. And if you watch the pilot for that, it's interesting. Jonathan Banks from Breaking Bad, do you know Mike, the character Mike on Breaking Bad?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of his first roles, and he's
No
like a
kidding.
young man in it. Well, not young, he's probably
Well, but
30.
I've seen pictures of him in that time, and you're right. Like,
And if you
yeah,
look at him, he looks so different, you don't even recognize him. But if you just hear his voice, it's like, oh yeah, that's Mike from Breaking Bad. Um, there was another one, Miami Vice. I haven't watched that one yet, but she was like, that's a great pilot.
oh,
And
I would
then
like to watch
the
that for
original,
fun. Yeah.
and then oh gosh, what was the other
You
one?
know
Oh,
Tubbs?
Hill Street Blues.
Yeah.
You ever watch that?
No, I just know the name.
I
Like,
don't.
it's one of those I assume that I've seen, and then when you asked me just now, I thought, actually, no,
I
never.
had never even heard of it, but if you watch, so this is like all free on YouTube and Amazon. So if you're bored with whatever TV you're watching now, go on there and watch some of these old pilot, specifically the pilots, but like sometimes they kind of went downhill after that, but the pilots were amazing.
Hmm.
Like, and they do have things like that, it's in the 80s, it's in the
Yeah.
70s, a little aged,
Hmm.
but the writing and the acting and everything about it, you can totally see why, oh, that was a hit.
Just looking at early pictures of Jonathan Banks, and I'm like, huh, yeah, that is a different guy.
It's a different guy.
I I recognize
So
80s
the
Jonathan
dad
Banks.
hack in this is you could watch these shows, but it's Jonathan Banks. So that guy held out to his career for 30 years before he got somewhere.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Wise Guy was a pretty big hit,
Hmm.
but he was not a big actor. Like
Right.
he was a nobody.
Hmm.
And he probably I don't know what he did, but that's just like that's amazing to think like he stuck it out for 30 years before he
Hmm.
finally and then he got that Breaking Bad and his character Airman Trout,
Yeah.
Mike Airman Trout was like coincidentally written into Breaking Bad.
Hmm.
They didn't plan on him originally in the script.
Right.
There was something came up with like a scheduling conflict with the other actors and they needed to fill some space
No
and
kidding.
yeah, the writers just came up with that character in the middle of the season.
I thought you were just saying like, yeah, he wasn't going to be a pivotal role.
No, he wasn't even
Yeah.
going to be in it.
It's kind of like Saul also. I mean, Odenkirk was so good in that role that
Yeah.
they found like there was some heat there and they developed more of it. So I'm sure the same thing's true with
With Airman Trout, that was not even a part of it. I think if you can look up videos with Vince, is it Gilligan?
Gilligan. Yeah.
He talks about he told a story about where that came from, and I think it came from like an earlier film or idea, and I think he always wanted to use that name for some
Airman
reason.
Trout.
Like Mike Ehrmantraut was like always his name he wanted to use, and he was just looking for an excuse to like put it into a show. But yeah, so those old shows, man, I've been having a lot of fun. I can't wait to watch Miami Vice. But she said Miami Vice pilot episode is as good as it gets as far as writing for TV.
Did she say what the trick was? I mean, like, was there some kind of
There's a lot to it. One of the things is writing for beats. So like writing for
sick beats?
sick beats,
Sweet.
No,
Like
like
big drops?
as you're writing, thinking about commercial breaks.
Oh,
So you're
okay,
writing
yeah.
in a way that you're like, I kind of know a certain
Yeah.
amount of time has gone by. And so it's like acts. It's writing in
So
acts where
leave
it's like
some kind
act
of a
one, act two, act three.
cliffhanger
Everything needs
like
to end with this kind of, oh, what's going to happen next?
with the commercial
And
break
she
in
did
mind.
make a good point. You see with like video on demand services now,
Mhm.
you kind of lose that. And
Yes.
some of the shows that kind of tank, it's because it just kind of goes on and on and on. And it doesn't have enough like gripping, like beat to like keep you interested. That was her point. And I think she's right.
Yeah. That's true in music too. Like a well-arranged song has great dynamic builds at the right times. You know,
Yep.
you can't stay lukewarm.
I did see Wilco the other day,
Oh, that's
and they would be the only ones that kind of break that formula.
yeah.
You know, that they specifically, you know, the one song they do where they just hit the there's a punch in the song that they just hit over and over and over. And when they do it live, they do it like 50 times. They like do it
Oh, they do.
to the
Yeah.
point that the audience is like waiting for him to stop, and he just keeps going. But that's a master, you know,
Yeah,
that's,
it's a little different. Yeah,
they're still good.
it's good.
It was a good
I
show.
had a buddy that was excited. Like I saw him the day of. He was excited to go to it, but he didn't invite me.
My
So
wife and I, like, when we go to Wilco shows, we like to like look for minorities. So like, she's like the only Asian there. And I was like, you know, you're going to be the only Asian at the show. And she's like, there'll be another one. There'll be another one.
maybe
And so we're
one.
sitting
Yeah,
at the entrance, like waiting for something other than a white dude to walk in the door.
a white dude in Vans or what?
Vans with a mustache.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
like-
gosh, and those clear frame glasses. Yeah.
It's like, it's funny too. If you say something like, okay, Wilco, their audience is like 95% white men.
Yeah.
In your mind, if you didn't know anything about Wilco, you would think, well, that must be like a Southern rock
Totally.
kind of
Yeah.
like Leonard Skinner kind of vibe.
No,
And you go, no,
The
no.
other kind of
This is
white
the other
guy.
kind of white guy.
Yeah, the Subaru driving white guy.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's like the white guy that would be completely horrified if you pointed out the fact that all of them are at the show.
Not the Toyota Tundra with the American flag tinted window.
Yeah.
We're talking about the
And
other.
I'll point out, I was at the show. I'm one of those guys.
Yeah, yeah. You're
And I love Skinner. I'm just a complicated man.
don't put him in a box.
Well,
Ah.
and eventually we saw my buddy Steve came, and he's African American. So it was
Oh,
like,
okay. Yeah.
and then another Asian walked in. And I told Steve, you're probably still going to be the only one. He was like,
The only
no, there'll be another one. Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe there was. I don't know. But
Yeah. No, it's funny.
it's the whitest NPR crowd in the
Oh,
world.
my
that
buddy
just
William
goes to
completely
Wilco.
fits the description we just gave.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the most loving way. But like,
William?
if you were to put if you were to put William in a lineup with the rest of the people I was hanging out with that day, and you go, which one of those guys is going to Wilco? That guy right there. I know which one.
I thought about wearing my Stetson, and I didn't.
Oh, man.
And then like too many guys were wearing that same Stetson, and I was really like kind of like, I think that's past. I'm glad they kind of let
Mhm.
that go,
Yep.
you know. So, welcome to the Conspiracy Dad podcast, where we talk about music and
Talk
films
about
and
80s sitcoms.
80s sitcoms. My name is Dante, your coast or your coast,
Coast to coast.
Coast to coast
with
host.
the most.
your host with my co-host,
So raise a toast.
Mr. Dave Hayes. I gave him your last name. Now the CIA is going to be
Uh-oh.
on you.
Well, after this podcast.
You want to hear a funny CIA story?
Okay.
They're listening, I'm sure. I don't know. Maybe they don't care about us. A buddy of mine does work for the agency. He's not going to care. He might not want to talk. I don't know. But I saw him the other day, and we were doing something, and somebody brought up that his boss was at this event that we were at. And I said, your boss? And he's like, yeah, like my other boss. And I said, like your Langley boss? And he was like, yeah, he's here. And I was like, can you put in a word for me? He's like, what? I said, dude, I'm just saying, if you need like a patriot musician to like go do something music related somewhere,
Uh-huh.
I'm your guy.
I'm your guy.
And he did tell me, he's like, I'm going to keep that in mind. And I think he meant it in the most sarcastic way.
It's hard to know if he's a good agent.
But then I thought, like, if I really did want to go work for an agency, this is a perfect cover.
a guy that always.
Well, yeah, like the conspiracy guy. Like, well, obviously I wouldn't work for an agency.
Is that Mockingbird that is the kind of like spin up weird?
I'd be a double
stuff?
agent from the conspiracy dad perspective.
It's all of the. I mean, kind of what you've been going on with these UFOs, psyop.
I'll be
transparency
honest,
stuff.
and this will get me disqualified. I would only want in so that I could find out about the aliens. Like, I do love America. I
Uh-huh.
do want us to lead and win. But my real motivation would be, I got to see those files, man. And I'll do anything to see those files.
I want to be in the agency just so I can see stuff that Grush is not allowed to see.
That's what I
Yeah,
mean. Yeah, I want to see it.
and then I want to like lord that over Grush.
Yeah.
Be like, "Oh, don't yeah, I can't tell you about that.
Sorry.
Sorry."
Top
Yeah.
secret.
Well, there is stuff that you can't see. What do you think about that, Grush?
Something tells me you and I just wouldn't be invited to those
I
parties.
think you're right.
I don't know why. My first inclination is
I
just to
think
tell. If I experience anything weird, my first thing I do, like most people probably keep it to themselves. I'm literally like writing songs about it and telling everyone. Like, you won't believe what crazy thing happened.
That's true. You're pretty transparent in terms of what's top of
I'm like
mind
the
for you.
opposite
Yeah.
of a spy, unless it was all a cover.
Yeah.
It's like when Joe Rogan, when what was it? He was talking about Sturgill Simpson. Wheeler Walker Jr.
Hmm.
was telling Rogan that he thinks that Sturgill Simpson's FBI or
He'd be
CIA.
awesome, CIA. Yeah.
And then he's like, "Why do you think that?" He's like, "Well, I brought it up to him once, and he's never talked to me since." So I don't know. I promise I'm not working for any agencies. I'm too
And
crazy.
yeah, gosh, where would you find the time? You're pretty accessible for
I
an
mean, if they
agent.
just needed me to like dose somebody or plant something, like I could just
You
be
could,
like, I'm playing a show in Amsterdam this weekend and
huh?
then, walk by somebody's thing. I could do it.
Well, now that like when I first met you, you were traveling a lot doing youth camps. And so
That
that's a pretty good
actually,
cover, yeah.
like they've used religion a lot to infiltrate
And particularly
all
like
kinds of
a
countries.
church like the Catholic Church that's like just worldwide,
Jesuits.
yeah.
That was a
Just
Catholic
go.
jab. But there are a lot of us that feel like the Jesuits might just be like a CIA infiltrated organization. I don't know. I don't have any evidence. I'm just saying.
I don't know. I'm just certain that that's the
I'm
case.
certain that that's the case. So my second dad hack will lead us into the
Oh,
conversation
good.
talking about
Okay.
today,
Yeah.
which is sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So this is for dads who are dad coaches. And this is something I
Not
thought
one
of.
that coaches other dads, but dads who happen to
Yeah,
coach.
dads
Yeah.
who are being dads coaching their kids in sports.
Mhm.
And I thought of this earlier this week or 2 weeks ago. And so ORU, they did the thing where every time they'd get on first, they'd give them a gummy worm. I don't know if you saw that. It was
No.
like a team thing. It was funny. I saw that and I was like, ooh, 9-year-old boys. Like
They'll
that's.
love that.
And
Yeah.
so I bought 3 like green fanny packs for the coaches and I filled them full of gummy bears. And I sat the kids down and I said, your coaches have the team's called the Sliders.
Uh-huh.
This is a slider pack and it's filled with slider snacks. And if you do something that a coach likes, you get a slider snack. And they're all just
Great.
like, just freaking
Yeah.
out, And it's like, if you get a play, slider snack. If you're paying attention, slider snack, so get as many as you can, guys. Your coaches are waiting. And so then Teddy was working on his pitching
Uh-huh.
and first 10 pitches, and it was all over the place. And it was the first time I implemented the plan.
Okay.
And I stopped him. I walked over and I said, all right, the next 10 pitches, every pitch you throw, for every pitch in a row that you get a gummy bear. And it was unbelievable. Like, I'm not kidding. Like,
It just like zeroed him
literally,
in.
he threw 8 straight strikes in a row, perfect. like immediately. And the thing I thought was, I could have walked up to him and said, for every pitch that you make here going forward, I will give you $1. And he would have been like, whatever. I could have said $10 and he probably would have been like, But if I said gummy bear, I'm getting that gummy bear. Like, high fructose corn syrup will motivate a 9-year-old boy like nothing else in the world. So, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Which leads us into what we're talking about today,
Yeah.
which is sugar and the conspiracy to poison and fatten Americans for the big sugar lobby.
To an early grave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother scam. You can't even die for free.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, it's very expensive
It's
to
all a
die,
scam.
particularly in the last
I
week.
know, because I get that funeral money.
That's funeral money. Holla.
Oh, it's just being honest. I get that funeral money. So Dave, why don't you tee
Enjoy
up
those gummy bears.
our conspiracy against the
Okay,
big
well,
that damn sugar lobby?
when I got into this conspiracy dad podcast, if somebody would have get said you're going to talk about big sugar, like we've been at this for 6 months or so now. I would have said I don't. Why would I do that? We're talking UFOs. We're
Yeah,
talking
that's not
government
sexy at
cover-ups, and
all.
um, and then also, you know, my wife's not much of a conspiracy person, but she does have an allergy to gluten. And she made the comment. My mom was trying to be nice. She made Rice Krispie treats for my family. Uh, and my mom, trying to be creative, Rice Krispies are gluten free. Gluten free Cheerios, however, despite the fact that they have this gluten free logo on their box, are not gluten free. So my mom, trying to like pizzazz up these Rice Krispie treats, put in these gluten free Cheerios. And my wife happened to mention, I can't actually have those.
Hmm.
And she said, it's because Cheerios puts all this, they fund all this stuff for like celiac research and for gluten free
Just to buy them
things
off so they can say that.
so that they can get a little logo to put on their box. So a lot of people that are trying to avoid gluten just for other kind of
So that's
health
legit. Like
benefits,
if she ate that, she would have a reaction.
she would
Yeah.
know that she ate gluten if she had that. So
So
if
it
you are,
legitimately has gluten and it says gluten free.
yeah.
That's nuts.
So that's what piqued my interest. And then like 2 days later, you and I are hanging out and you kind of went on this rant. I don't know if you can reproduce, kind of rattle off the same things you said, but what caught my attention, you go, one in particular, you said, well, glaucoma is just too much sugar in your
Yeah,
eyes.
no,
And
it was a video that somebody tagged on Twitter that I saw that was like, yeah, too much sugar in a young child's brain is ADHD. Too much sugar in an adult's brain is dementia. Too much sugar in your eyes is glaucoma. Too much sugar in your skin is aging. Too much sugar in your body is inflammation and cancer. Too much sugar.
mm,
I mean, it went down the list of
yeah,
like all these medical things and it was like, sugar is the problem. Like, if you just didn't eat so much sugar,
we consume, I mean, compared to like pre-World War II, excuse me, we consume something like 12 times the amount of sugar that we used to. So
I would even
to,
guess it'd be more than that.
it's something like I mean, we used to eat something like, you know, a pound in a month, or gosh, I wanted to have this at the ready, but it was something like a
A
pound a
lot
month, and
less.
then now it's something like 50 pounds a year. I mean, it's like,
Jeez,
I mean,
50 pounds of sugar.
it would take us years to like, anyway,
And I know
it's
liver, like, yeah,
exponentially.
like all kinds of like liver failure and stuff is like on the rise,
Hmm.
like on a massive way.
Yeah.
And some of that's like alcohol related, but a lot of it's just diet,
Hmm. Well,
just
that's
people
the
eating
comment I've
sugar.
heard. I mean, yeah, alcohol is sugar. I mean, getting inebriated is kind of just a very extreme sugar rush.
Yeah.
And
Which
yeah,
why is why it leads to a lot of diabetic
exactly. Yeah,
people. Yeah.
diabetic. Goodness, it didn't take long for me to like start looking into this to just find a wealth of shady business
Yeah.
from the sugar industry. Um, so as early as 1942, all of these sugar farmers, sugar cane specifically is what we're talking about, like dextrose, sucrose, corn syrup, that type of sugar, white sugar. And some of the comments I heard,
Gummy bear sugar.
gummy bear sugar is totally what we're talking about. We're not talking about like a scoop in your coffee in the morning. We're talking about like uh, peanut M&Ms by the bowlful, like I eat at the end of my day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this started to really come into the public eye. Uh, Late 40s, more mid 50s, Dwight D. Eisenhower has a heart attack. And it's right in the middle of the early 50s where nationally we're starting to get a sense of like, why is everybody having heart disease for seemingly
Hmm.
no reason? And it's because, I mean, some doctors would say it's because of this giant uptick around that time in processed sugar getting just injected by like crazy into our foods.
Hmm.
And you think about like Mad Men era type times, that's when, bowls of sugary cereal are for the kids being marketed all the time. Um, frozen dinners, lots of sugar, and just everything is just processed sugary foods. And again, there was a little cut on a podcast I listened to of a soundbite of somebody going like, 5 out of 10 men will suffer from heart disease, and we have no idea why. um, so I don't know how familiar you are with John Yudkin, but he's a doctor that uh, around that time started really looking into this, and his position was that white sugar was the reason. His book was called Pure White and Deadly.
But were they eating more sugar then than we are now, or
No,
less?
we're eating even more now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how are we staving off the heart
I don't know if
attacks?
it's development of other medical. I think what it is, and this is speculation, we have developed a lot of medical technology,
To keep us
specifically
alive? Yeah.
in the pharmaceutical
To
industries, right?
fight the thing that's just really a dietary issue.
So,
Yeah.
right, exactly. So, like my, uh, I've got people in my family that have diabetes that aren't like obese. They could stand
Mm.
to lose weight, but diabetes, I don't remember it being that common when I was in high school. And now it just seems like every other person I talk to has it. Um, and yeah, even people like that I know to do their best not to take in a lot of salt or to drink Diet Coke or to try and go keto or, that sort of stuff. Um, I think that they're probably ingesting too much sugar, um, based off of just some of the research I've done this week and thinking about. I never hear those people say I'm avoiding sugar specifically. They're always
Hmm.
avoiding calories, fat, bread, right? So, again, that's
Well, and
speculation, but
that goes back to, wasn't there a time where the sugar lobby specifically, like they created, they were this feeling of like fat was
yeah,
the enemy
mm-hmm,
and that sugar was okay.
yeah.
And they absolutely knew. It was like the tobacco thing, where it's like they were saying, yeah, it's good for asthma.
So
And
glad
then
you
it was
brought
like,
this up.
yeah,
Yeah,
instead, and it was like, no, actually, you just paid off a bunch of politicians to create this food pyramid that was, and now they're looking at going like fat is good.
yeah,
Like
mm-hmm,
fat is good,
yeah,
sugar bad.
right,
But we literally for like 50 years were told the opposite, which is the
correct.
conspiracy that
Yeah,
like there really was a conspiracy to manipulate and brainwash the entire American population into thinking one thing was good to eat and the other thing was bad to eat. And all it had to do with was these sugar manufacturers making a lot of money
yes.
selling sugar.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought up tobacco because they're kind of the poster child for like conspiratorial mass manipulation of the population, trying to, shade how bad their product is for your health. But actually, the sugar industry's been at it for longer,
And way worse.
and
I think it's way worse
they're
for you.
worse. But the what's interesting is like the tobacco industry actually garnered some tricks off of the sugar industry and like poached some of their marketing executives to come over to
Hmm.
tobacco to pull the same stunts. So sugar's been at this game longer than tobacco.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, it didn't take long for me to find a lot of this stuff. It was interesting.
Dude, it's weird when you think about it, especially with like the food pyramid, that is a legitimate conspiracy,
Yeah.
that people colluded who were not doctors, who worked for the ag department to develop a eating pattern that we would put into, propaganda in
Yeah.
every school all across this country to brainwash us
Mm-hmm.
into thinking that we should be eating a certain way that they specifically knew was not good for you. And it was all motivated by money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's insane.
It is insane. We're talking about, and it's particularly tricky because lobbyists will do things like encourage the government and lawmakers to make the regulations for quote unquote like dangerous foods. Like if I want to prove a food is dangerous, the standard is a certain level for me to be able to like
Mm-hmm.
mark it as a do not eat this food. So while you can do a lot of research and find a lot of the stuff we're talking about, oh, sugar, a lot of correlation between heart disease or diabetes or inflammation or glaucoma. The standards are set in such a way that the FDA can say, well, we cannot verify this as a food associated with glaucoma, for instance, like because it doesn't fit the same criteria. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um, so it on paper, you go, I mean, okay, I see the study and it does not meet the criteria that the FDA's got for foods that you should avoid. Um, but that doesn't mean it's not dangerous. It just means they learned how to manipulate the rules to where the language is such that sugar doesn't fall under that umbrella, right?
It also just illustrates how, like, we are just mouth breathing sheep,
Oh,
like, in
yeah.
so many ways.
Yeah.
And I think the weirdest thing about becoming a conspiracy dad is like coming to terms with that
Hmm.
and like realizing, oh my God, like people actually believe uh anything they're told. And you could just like make up all kinds of fantastical stories and people will just believe you, especially if you're in a position of authority, you know?
You ever heard the concept of like, you've got young kids and kids will just run out in the street or they'll talk to strangers and that sort of thing. And sometimes a psychologist will say, well, that's actually good. That means you raise them in an environment where their whole world is safe, right?
Hmm.
Which I think that's true. If your kids are not afraid of strangers, like generally speaking, if they're friendly to other strangers, that's because you've kind of put them in a situation where to them, everybody they talk to is
Hmm.
generally pretty friendly to them and not a threat. Um, I think that by and large, since we live in a first world, in the West, we're used to teachers and people of authority. Our personal encounters with authority figures is pretty good, relatively speaking. I mean, like we're not under some kind of
Yeah,
dictatorship.
compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it's easy for us to fall into that being sheep with news anchors and particularly with people like officials from government agencies like the FDA, where this guy's wearing a tie, his hair is cut nice, and he says, hey, listen, we're paid by the government to make sure that you are safe, citizen. And don't worry about sugar. Matter of fact, why don't you enjoy sugar? It's not bad for you. You can have sugar. And then we leave that exchange going, oh, I mean, I trust that. He's not even a
It's
sales
it's
guy.
the
He's a
government.
he's a researcher. He's
Yeah.
not a sales
It's not
guy.
business.
Yeah, I pay him. So surely he's working for my best interest.
Surely.
It couldn't be that
It's a
it
game.
couldn't be that the Sugar Association based in Washington D.C. has anything to do with what that guy's telling me right now. When you talk about being a conspiracy dad, I came across a researcher named Kristen Kearns
Hmm.
who started out as a dentist and early 2000s, mid 2010 ish, like 2007. She's at a dental conference.
Does she get started on fluoride?
No, I
Hmm.
she
That's a
she
whole nother
okay,
podcast we can
yeah.
get into.
um,
Not too different than sugar, though, as far as the
sh-
conspiracy
I'll
side of
bet.
it. Yeah.
This so I want to get into the conflict this has caused for me um because for one I love peanut M&Ms, so there's a conflict of interests there because after we get done with this I'm going home to have some. um but also it ties in with other foods that I'm a big proponent for but share a lot of the same practices, so
Hmm.
I'm having like a crisis in, of intellectual integrity at this point. But Kristen Kearns was a dentist up until about 2007. She goes to this dental conference, and one of the speakers hands out a pamphlet talking about tooth decay and sugar, um, and then but doesn't mention any other kind of like other problems that sugar introduces. She
Hmm.
goes, okay, that's fine. Uh, but then like another speaker gets up, hands out another pamphlet, and says, okay, this is a talk on foods that are, if you're on the go, so many of us are busy these days. Let's talk about fast foods that are okay to eat. And the one that caught her attention that had the green light was Lipton Brisk Tea. And it had like your daily allotment of sugar is something like 44 grams. And this had more than that.
Hmm.
And she stopped the speaker like outside of in the lobby and was like, hey, you know that the iced tea is on this, right? And he's like, uh-huh. She said, do you know how much sugar is? It's way more sugar than we're supposed
Yeah,
to
yeah, it's
have.
like a Coke.
And he kind of was like, it's good talking to you. I'll see you later.
Bye.
And so she,
Work for Nestle, I'm sure.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
directly or indirectly, well, the result of that conversation was she went and just took a deep dive and started finding all these documentations that were on, like in old school library, hard copies of marketing papers from the 70s and, sugar industry propaganda of she kind of is getting to the bottom of how they are swaying the government into letting them get away with all of the things we're talking about. So, in the show notes, I'm going to be sure to put a link to Kristen Kern's work because that's someone that had no interest in what we're talking about, was not into conspiracy theories, and kind of like myself with some of these other conspiracy theories, she starts seeing the trend and is like, well, we can't pretend that this isn't happening, right? Um,
And she probably, it's a weird, like you're always kind of going back and forth. Like, is this a crazy person? Is this like, you know what I
right.
mean? As far as an authority figure. And then to me, it's always like, if you can say, if this person isn't an authority, who is?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you stop there and you go, well, I don't know, they're a dentist, they're qualified in this way, and this
Mm-hmm.
way. I mean, are they just nuts? I mean, it's the same thing with the UFO thing. When you look at like a Fravor and you just go like, is he an expert in what's in the sky or not? If
Right.
he is, which he is, I mean, who knows better?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Back to the thing, even doctors are sheeple, even lawyers
Yeah.
are sheeple. There's a lot
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
people that, are in positions of authority, but that doesn't mean that they do the research. And a lot of times I think they're just digesting or, repeating information that they're given from the lobbyist and
Mm-hmm.
from different, you know, organizations within medical and dental and whatever, but they doesn't mean that they've done the research. They haven't looked at any research. They're just repeating, well, the ADA said that we should
Yeah.
do this and this is good. And you're just trusting that the ADA is actually right.
Totally. Yeah.
They could be wrong. You don't know.
I heard a great comment from a politician. He was talking about lobbyists and he was saying, like, I know that they are just considered generally evil, but, as a politician, I'm going from meeting to meeting. No one has the bandwidth to pay attention to all of these different issues. So there is some value in what lobbyists do in terms of raising awareness for their particular issue. Um, but all that to say, to your point, yeah, a lot of these politicians that are voting on these bills for the requirements for banned foods from the FDA, they just got done talking to some lobbyist. They haven't thought about sugar for more than 30 minutes that morning, and they're like, yeah, yeah, well, if you said sugar's okay, I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, we just give them too much power.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, federally, I mean, it's just, Washington, I've heard it's like Washington is Hollywood for ugly people. And it's just because you're on camera, just because you're on camera doesn't mean you have any idea what you're talking about. But
well
as
said.
Americans, we just assume that if you're beautiful and you're on camera, or if
Absolutely,
there's
yeah.
a microphone in front of
Yeah,
you, obviously you must know what you're talking about.
right. That is hilarious. Like, yeah, like we you bought these microphones just like anybody else could, but for some reason when people are on a microphone on a screen, you're like, these guys know a lot. Yeah.
So to button it up, what do people need to know about sugar? Eat way less,
Eat way less. Really, really generally speaking.
like just shop in the produce aisle,
Yeah,
and pretty much everything else in Walmart is not good for you.
right. So like whole food sugar, brown sugar is far better for you than
Refined.
white sugar. Like what a lot, we talk about sugar. I mean, I'm sure we would if we looked into it. The corn industry has got a lot of parallels here. Like corn syrup, for instance, goes into that. So, um, yeah, I would say do some research. Probably listen to Huberman or some doctor dude. But brown sugar, whole food sugar, fruits,
So we're not actually
not
giving
gummy
you any
bears.
advice on
Yeah.
this podcast because we're dads, and there's only so much we can pay attention to. But we are saying sugar's bad.
Sugar's bad, and just this being a conspiracy podcast, be aware that, like I said, I wanted to qualify all this with like one of the podcasts I was listening to was a doctor. He does the podcast nonprofit. All the proceeds go to charity stuff. Um, and he's like, sugar's bad, sugar industry bad, bad, bad. And I'm listening to this like, this doctor rocks. He gives his money to charity, and he doesn't like sugar. And he's like, and in my next episode, we're going to talk about the beef industry. And I was like, whoa, because I'm a big proponent of red meat. And
Yeah.
like, if you're going to only eat one thing, just eat steaks and just do that. Or like, if I'm going on like a diet, then I'll just eat ground beef and fruit. Um, that may not be the best thing to do. So I guess I say all that to say, this was an interesting dive into sugar for one, but also like some of the other things I found along the way, are making me question like my thoughts on other things, because this was one of the first times I went in with a few ideas of my own that I was feeling really like glad to have my biases confirmed. And then at the same time, I would hear points from the same person I was agreeing with that was conflicting with stuff I thought. And I was like, I don't know about this guy
I think
anymore.
we can just establish though it's just way we eat way too much sugar. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
that's not the issue. The answer of how much you should eat, what kind of diet you should be on, um, that's for a smarter podcast. I don't know the answer, but it is the point we would make is just yeah, it's another conspiracy that these you know people colluded to tell us we should be eating stuff that we shouldn't be eating.
The takeaway for me was kind of back to your point of sheeple, and just because they're on a screen and have a microphone, yeah, you've got to do your own research and decide what's
When I got into
for
looking
you.
into it, to me that was the biggest visual when I started to realize what was healthy to eat.
Uh-huh.
And like if you think about a grocery store
Oh,
like a
sure.
Walmart, and
Yeah.
somebody told me that like shop in the
Right.
produce section, literally there's about 15% of most
Yeah.
grocery stores.
Yeah.
You say everything in here is actually decent and you could eat it, but almost 85% of everything else in that store, you really shouldn't eat.
Right.
I know that sounds extreme, but it's, if you're being 100% honest, it's, you should eat, if you were going to eat it, you should eat very little of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when we go shopping, like, why do we even have all these aisles? You're going up and down, and you can look around and go, none of this is good. Like, don't eat any of
Right.
this,
Yeah.
steak and salad and potatoes and,
Yeah.
all that, real whole foods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I think of it is
Just
that
eat an apple.
kind of caveman diet approach. Like, well, what were our bodies designed to eat? Fruit, nuts, meat,
Yeah.
no sugar.
I say all of that, and then I'm a guy. I do fasting,
Mm-hmm.
and like I do think that what you eat matters, but I think how you eat it matters more than what you eat. And I think that our bodies can process a lot of garbage if you are fasting regularly, and not just like constantly putting
Okay.
things on your
Yeah.
organs.
Are you
Um,
saying, I mean, is the thinking that they, since your body is running on like fumes at certain points, it's pulling
Yeah,
like,
after 16 hours of fasting, again, I'm not giving advice, but after 16 hours of fasting, your body starts to attack damaged cells within your body. So it literally
okay,
starts killing inflammation and
great. Okay.
like regenerating,
Yeah.
and you produce growth hormones that start to heal your body. So, there's guys that eat, I basically eat a feast and famine diet.
Mm-hmm.
I'll eat usually just one meal a day, and then the lights go out. That's just, they're kicking us out, I
That's
guess.
yeah.
But I eat one meal a day and I just eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
But I'm only eating within a window of usually like 5 to like 10.
Yeah.
And then after that, I don't eat anything until the next. And it's worked for me, but I think uh, it did just naturally cut down on my sugar a
Sure. Yeah.
lot. And yeah, I feel a million times better than I did before. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, well, they're kicking us out. So
Yeah.
Dave, thank you for joining me on this podcast. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you enjoy the podcast, please like, subscribe, share. Uh, the next one, I think we might tackle fluoride. I
Okay.
don't know.
Yeah. Well, I
It's a
mean,
good
yeah,
one.
and there are I think just from the little bit that I got into, there are plenty of industries that
It's
are doing the
America,
same
buddy.
stuff.
It's
Yeah,
America.
capitalism.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you for listening. We will see you next time. Take care.